Why, hello there. I am a fan of stories that have to do with Arthurian lore or, fiction and stuff in that realm, having to do with King Arthur, Knights of the Round Table, people that are in that orbit, Merlin, Morgan Le Fay. And so when I found out about the book, The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman, who is the author of the Magician series of books, I really wanted to read it. It's quite a big book. It's, I think, just under 700 pages. I read an e-copy of it, so I'm not sure what the physical book is, if there's any difference or whatnot. But it's a chonker, and I'm not sure if this is gonna be standalone. It felt like a standalone book, but who's to say if there are not more in the future that there's a lot of ways we could delve into this storyline. So I could see there being future books, but this could also be a standalone. So time will tell. So this book follows the story of the main character, Cullum. He is 17. He was kind of given up by his parents. So he lived in the town of Mull, and he came from this really horrible situation. He didn't really know who his mother was growing up. When he was younger, he ended up going to live with this terrible, I don't know, like lord of the land or whatever, Sir Alistair, I believe was his name. So he ended up being shipped off to this guy, Sir Alistair, who had a larger household. There was a bunch of people that lived there. It was almost like, it seemed like a feudal system almost, with the amount of people that were there. Like the sons and stuff of Alistair would train to be knights and whatnot. And so Cullum goes there and he's beaten and abused and just treated like dirt until one day in the courtyard, and for some reason he didn't have anything to do, and he goes and he basically like beats the knights in training, like the sons of Alistair, and the guy who's training them is like, okay, he's better than any of you guys. So he starts to train him, and this kind of saves his life, because otherwise, like I said, he was being abused and beaten and just horrible things were happening to him. One thing I did not like about this book is there's so much attempted rape in it. So content warnings, please read those. But it's like overkill. Maybe once or twice, I get it. It was medieval times, rape and pillage. But it felt like it was overkill how much attempted rape there was in this. I'm going to stop saying that word. Outside of that, the story is really great. And I felt like it didn't need all of that in there. Does it make it heavier? Does it make it more emotional? Maybe. But it felt highly unnecessary. What I did like about it is I did like the story overall as a whole. And I liked the adventure of it. I liked the questions about life and purpose. And so Cullum, he comes up in this horrible situation. And it's basically about overcoming, having all this self-doubt and whatnot. And when he finally leaves this horrible land with this horrible guy, Alistair, he decides he's going to go join the Knights of the Round Table because he's heard of them all his life. So he's heading towards Camelot. And so he gets kind of near the town finally, and he stays at this tavern, and he ends up talking to this woman who's there, like she's apparently works there, and sits down, and he kind of like spills his guts to her about like what he's doing, why he's there, and she's like, well, the ship's already sailed and the sword's in the sea, and I just want you to know that I knew ahead of time. And he's like, what are you talking about? And this all leads up to when he finally gets to Camelot. So he continues on to Camelot. Oh, and also, like, after she gets the story and tells him all the stuff, she's like, okay, I quit, and, like, leaves the tavern and disappears. And then he doesn't see her again for a while. She appears again in the story. So he gets to Camelot, and he just walks right in. And no one seems to care. And there's a few people around, milling around, and he's like, okay, ooh, this is interesting. Like, he didn't even think he'd be able to get in the door, walking around, and like, he just goes in this doorway, and all of a sudden he's in the room where the round table is. And there's a few knights kind of milling around, and they finally notice him. And the one is like, piss off, get out of here. And he's like trying to be like, well, I wanted to pledge my allegiance to you guys and possibly see about seeking knighthood and all this stuff. They kind of laugh at him, and they're like, yeah, you picked a bad time. Arthur is dead. There was a big battle. Arthur's bastard son and him killed each other. Mordred was the son's name. And so this is where he comes in. And so he's kind of devastated by this. And then one of the knights takes it upon himself that he's going to beat Gollum's butt and maybe kill him. So they get in a big fight, and then the fight ends up stopping. As time progresses, Nimue comes in, and Nimue was Merlin's apprentice. Merlin is buried in a hill because Merlin had ulterior motives. He was greedy. He himself also may have been a bit rapey. Yeah, another unnecessary rapey person, but anyway. She's like, hey, you guys need to get it together. We need to figure out what we're doing because everyone's gonna come and try and attack us now. Our king is dead. They're gonna come for us, and you guys are like moping around like a bunch of dinguses. That's not exactly what she said, but it's somewhere along those lines. The one guy stops fighting Gollum, and Gollum had heard all these stories and kind of knew who each person was each night that was there, and so there's only very few left. And as they get to talking, Gollum's like, well, what if we do what Arthur used to do with like call for a miracle and then we don't eat any food until that miracle comes. So there's a lot too in this story about Christianity and then also about like the old ways and pagan ways and whatnot. And a lot of those questions that interweave and this and that and how if God is still there and with them or he just has abandoned them or all this stuff. So they call for a miracle to happen. And none of them really believe anything's going to happen, right? So as they're sitting there, all of a sudden the far wall just kind of disappears and there's like a forest. And then they see something walking towards them. And it's basically like a green man or a green knight, a knight made of vines and plants and whatnot. And so he comes forward out of this and he's like, who's summoned me? And they're like, okay, we just asked for a miracle from God. And then we got like some weird deity has just come. It gets interesting as the lines are blurred between the pagan and the Christians, and there's also like a weird spiritual war that takes place in this between like angels and fairies, and it's kind of crazy. Like there's so much good fantasy stuff in it, and I still have to go back to the fact that I felt like there was just so much unnecessary attempted rape. Why so much? Lev Grossman. So he comes through. And the knights are like, okay, who's gonna fight him? Who's gonna fight him? Because the Green Knight is like, who is here to challenge me? I will tell you my secret if someone can beat me. The one knight who was trying to fight Gollum and almost killed him, he's like, well, he decides he's gonna fight him. And then he ends up getting his butt beat. And so Gollum then steps up and he actually wins the fight. And so the Green Knight is like, hey, tells him something along the lines of about how the spear of destiny or the spear that had stabbed Jesus Christ through the side is still around, and that, you know, maybe if they go find it, then a new king will be chosen for them and such. Kind of how like when Arthur was chosen, he pulled the sword out of the stone and all that. And so now they have new purpose. They're going to go forth and they're going to try to find this spear. And so the story goes. It is really well written. I liked the characters quite a bit. I really liked the main character. I liked the questioning of the different aspects of religion and all of that, and just the weirdness of it. I felt there was so much good about it, but I've already obviously stated my annoyances and complaints about one specific thing. Everything else about it was great, except for that, which kind of really is a downer. And I feel like there'll be a lot of people that don't like it because of that. Dude went a little overkill in the book, if you ask me. Knowing that, it is up to you if you want to read it or not. If there is another book that comes out after this, I would read it. This is one of those ones that, like, I'm torn about it, and because of that, I couldn't love it. I couldn't love this book. I can't give a glowing recommendation for it. Like, the core story is good, but there are elements in it that I hated. There you have it. That is my opinion on this book. Make of that what you will. So if you are a fan of stories that are Arthurian, a book I loved. Let's give you a book I loved that was like Arthurian fiction. That was amazing. Is Spear by Nicola Griffith. That book is awesome. If you are a fan of fantasy books, the next video coming up will be about another fantasy book. So stick around, check it out. And if you enjoyed hanging out today, hit that subscribe button, come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.